Hello again everyone, and today I'm taking a look at the least expensive kit lens which ships with Sony's full-frame mirrorless cameras. I'm testing the Sony 28-70mm f3.5 to 5.6 OSS. If you want to purchase it separately from a camera, it will set you back an astonishing £400 in the UK, but only $350 in the US. Another case of horribly inflated UK prices. If Sony continue this way, they won't have a UK market left. But anyway, in both cases, it's still a bit of money for a kit lens. You will be able to find it far cheaper over on eBay. This lens is only for Sony's mirrorless cameras, although that zoom range of 28-70mm means that it's obviously most appropriate for full-frame cameras. In fact, I won't be testing this particular lens on APS-C this time. 28-70mm, well, even on a full-frame camera, isn't really a very good zoom range. Most kit lenses can zoom out wider or zoom in further than this, and the maximum aperture of f3.5 to 5.6 is pretty dark, so it's not very versatile at all for a zoom lens. A handy feature of this lens though is image stabilization, which Sony calls OSS. Here's some footage without stabilization at 70mm, and here's the same footage with it turned on. As you can see, it's really efficient, holding your image nice and still for smoother video work and sharper still pictures. Let's look at the lens itself then. Although it's made of plastic, the build quality feels pretty nice. The zoom and focus rings are broad and rubberized, and they turn very smoothly. The filter thread at the front is 55mm, and the lens comes with a small hood. The lens is fairly lightweight, but also surprisingly large. It's based on a metal lens mount, but as you can see here, there's a lot of space from the mount to the rear optics. It looks like Sony are probably presenting us with a digital SLR lens with a tube at the back, which kind of eliminates a lot of the size advantage of using a mirrorless camera in the first place. I hate that design philosophy. I mean, look at the size of Sony's kit lens for their APS-C mirrorless cameras, which even has a wider zoom range. Annoying. Anyway, so long as you don't mind the lens's slightly oversized design, the build quality is really very nice. Okay, but how about image quality? I'm going to really push this lens by trying it on a Sony a7R II with its demanding 42 megapixel image sensor. At 28mm and at f3.5, image quality in the middle is extremely sharp. Over in the corners, we see softness and a little purple chromatic aberration. Stop down to f5.6 for a good improvement, and at f8, the corners are pretty sharp. f11 looks even slightly better. Stop down further than that, and the image will start getting softer from diffraction. Let's zoom in halfway then to 45mm. The maximum aperture is now f4.5. In the middle of the image, we continue to see fantastic sharpness. Over in the corners, the image quality is a bit softer, but far better than it was at 28mm. There isn't much improvement at f5.6, but at f8 and f11, those corners look pretty sharp. And finally, 70mm. It's the same story here. At the widest aperture, f5.6, we see great sharpness in the middle. The edges of the image are a little soft. However, f8 is far sharper, and that sharpness continues down to f16. Overall, considering that we're testing on a 42 megapixel camera, the lens's sharpness is pretty impressive, I think. Especially if you stop its aperture down to f8, you can get plenty of sharpness across the image frame, and the lens is always fantastically sharp in the middle, so good job Sony. Alright, let's see about vignetting and distortion on a full-frame camera. Sony try to force distortion corrections on you, even if you shoot in RAW, but if you use third-party software, you can see the true RAW performance. At 28mm and f3.5, there's a little less barrel distortion than usual for a zoom lens, although there is plenty of vignetting. Those corners get a bit brighter at f5.6 and f8, although vignetting never completely goes away at 28mm. Zoom in to 35mm and the barrel distortion begins to flip into pincushion distortion. And at 70mm we see a wild amount of pincushion distortion and some pretty dark corners at f5.6. Those corners begin to brighten a little at f8 and f11, but still vignetting remains, so overall it's a pretty weak performance for vignetting and distortion. It won't bother you if you're shooting in JPEG mode, as Sony automatically corrects it in camera for you. Alright, let's see about close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to about 45cm, not bad, but further than average for a kit lens. At f5.6, the sharpness is great, although contrast is slightly lowered and a touch of purple fringing is visible. Stop down to f8 for perfect image quality close up. Let's see now how the lens works against bright lights. When they're in the picture, we don't see too much flaring, even when you're zoomed in, and contrast remains okay, so that's a good showing. And finally, bokeh. A lens with a slow maximum aperture doesn't offer much opportunity for background separation. The quality of the bokeh rendered by this lens is pretty nice and smooth. But if you have quite busy backgrounds which are just slightly defocused, then an edge of busyness will come in. Overall, in many ways, the Sony 28-70 performs very much like a typical kit lens. It struggles with vignetting and distortion, it has a poor zoom range and maximum aperture. Its build quality though is nicer than average for a kit lens, but its size is annoyingly large. I think its best feature is its good sharpness. Even on a 42MP camera, it's capable to yield very high resolution images, even into the corners, especially if you stop down to about f8. So if you don't mind its disappointing size and zoom range, and surprisingly high price here in the UK anyway, then it's actually just about recommendable.